All right, it's your boy Jay Barber back with you, Studio Noize Podcast, the voice of Black art, bringing you the very best. We live at the Bayer Gallery once again. Y'all checking out, whether you're looking at it on YouTube or you're checking on the podcast, we here. I brought a very extra special guest. We got my friend, Tate Baeza, here with us on the podcast. How you doing, Lauren?
I'm doing amazing. I'm so happy to be here in this blackety black space.
Oh, it's super black. We black today. Lauren is the curator of African art at the High Museum, amongst other things that you do. Matter of fact, Lauren, introduce yourself. Tell the people what you do.
I'm Tate Baeza. I'm a curator, I'm a writer, I'm a scholar. I'm particularly interested in 20th century African art, especially art of great political transitions like late colonialism, early post-colonialism, apartheid transition. I'm really, really interested in how artists express themselves during these periods of time and what we can learn about the functionality and purpose of art from these moments of sort of heightened transitions. I use transitions a lot, don't I?
It's a transition.
Jamal gave me Chardonnay, so...
Yes, this is the Drink Champs edition of the Noize today.
But yeah, I'm a curator of African art at the High, as you said, but I work on a lot of other projects on the continent especially.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to do that.
And that's what I find very impressive about you is how much work you do, how much traveling, all the different projects. You're a woman of many, many talents.
Thank you, sir.
And you managed to look beautiful while you're doing it. Look how she dressed.
Y'all
need to check out the video. But looking fabulous while you're doing it.
Trying to stay hydrated.
So Lauren I'm so glad we caught Lauren because she was just in New York. She was just overseas. She was just everywhere. Anytime you talk to her, she just got back from somewhere. But now she's here in Atlanta with us. And if you haven't had a chance, y'all have until July 30th to come and see this wonderful, tremendous show. And you know I'm a print lover, so I love this show. Bruce Onobrakpeya. Did I say it right? Onobrakpeya. The Mask and the Cross.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful exhibition, second floor of the High. It's really, really awesome. And Lauren was the curator for it.
Yes.
So Lauren made it all happen. So we had to get Lauren on the show to show how giddy with excitement I am. Just from looking at all the wonderful prints. First of all, we got to talk about Bruce. Tell us about Bruce and his kind of history.
Yeah, so I'm really honored to do the show. I should say that when I first accepted the position at the High Museum, there was already a block on the calendar. It had been some time since they'd had a curator of African art. We were in the middle of the pandemic when I was hired. And they were just eager to have an exhibition of African art because it had been a while. And so there was just this block that said African art exhibition. And I was like, oh God, I got to figure out what to do in like a year and a half, which is not a lot of time. So I started just digging into the collection, trying to understand what I had inherited so that I could respond to that, whether that was to opportunities in the collection or to strengths in the collection. I didn't want to just go blindly into this position with what I personally find interesting. I really wanted to be responsive to and sort of celebrate and add value to all the previous collecting efforts. So when I was doing that, I discovered, firstly, that a large percentage of our collection is Nigerian. And I thought that was a really incredible opportunity because we are a sister city to Lagos. We have a large and growing Nigerian population in the metropolitan area, et cetera. So I thought that's interesting. It's a new way to engage our community. And then I found a complete series of Bruce Onobrakpeya prints called The Stations of the Cross. And so from there, I decided, okay, this is going to be the show. I only have one of the small galleries to use. I can try to tell a very simple story about this incredibly important and famous artist's career. And that was his Christian motifs throughout his career, the commissions he did with the Catholic Church. And I say that because he has been making work for 65 years or so.
Wow.
He's about to turn 91.
And still doing it.
Still doing it. And as you can imagine, in that time has done a lot of different types of work, right? Like, a lot of art historians kind of group his artistic career into sort of 8 creative phases. And this Mask and the Cross phase is just one of 8. So it's, again, very select, small way to sort of narrow way to kind of filter through his career. without feeling like you're shorting people. If I tried to do a survey in a small space, I would be giving you such a tiny bit of everything. And I thought it would be more robust to pick a creative period and tell that story fully. But of course, with that is the risk of people who are being introduced to his work for the first time not understanding that he's not the Nigerian Christian artist. This is just something that he does, but he has so many other expressions, so many other concepts that he expresses in his work over time. So he's extremely, extremely well known. He has every highest national honor in his home country of Nigeria. He's got a UNESCO, Living Treasure Award. He's had recognition at the Venice Biennale long before there was even a Nigerian pavilion at the Venice Biennale. So he's quite acclaimed, and I was actually quite surprised to learn when I started working on this show that this is his first United States solo exhibition. So that it made it even more important, and I feel even more honored to be the person that made this happen.
Yeah. I think this is what I love about going to the high and introduce to people like you to have like a vast range of expertise in what they do, because you do get introduced to these people that I would never have known his name, honestly. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Unless you have an in-depth study of Nigerian art, his name wouldn't have come to the forefront of what I was looking at. And so I think that's a shame.
Yeah.
Like now I've been looking at him like voraciously since I looked at the prints.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. That's the idea.
Yeah, because it really is magnificent. So all this time, did he start out as a printmaker?
No, he actually studied painting in university. So he went to the University of Nigeria at Zaria, as it was called at the time, and he studied fine art, but with an emphasis in painting. And he started going to workshops after he graduated in Oshogbo and other places, and fell madly in love with printmaking. And he had some cursory introduction to printmaking as an art student in university, but it really was these postgraduate workshops that he went to that transformed him. He said, I think it was Roel van Rossum, actually, the printmaker, the Dutch printmaker.
Wow.
Was his teacher who taught him all these tricks, taught him how to innovate printmaking, exposed him to printmaking in a different way than what he was exposed to with the cursory introduction in university. And he was hooked. He said he didn't paint for 15 to 20 years after that.
Yeah.
Of course, he started to reincorporate it. He started to reincorporate it later, but he was hooked on exploring sort of the depth of printmaking and how far can you push this medium?
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And we're all better for it. He did a tremendous job. And so the work that's in the show is the Stations of the Cross. Then there's the middle section. What's the middle section?
May Your Kingdom Come. So I should back up and say that there's 3 sections to the exhibition in its current iteration. It may travel. Stay tuned for that. But at the High Museum, there's 3 sections to this exhibit. The first 2 are commissions that he received directly from the Catholic Church, facilitated by Reverend Father Kevin Carroll. And then the last section really gets into his technique, and it pulls examples from later on, 1975 through about 2022, where he is continuing to revisit some of these initial themes from earlier in his career.
Yeah.
The 2 commissions happened in the late 60s. The first was Stations of the Cross, which actually came out of a commission that he received to do a mural inside of a church around the ceiling, like the periphery. And then later on, 2 years later, actually, after he completed that mural, which would have been 1967, he went back to his studies and drawings that he was, using as references for the mural, and he made this beautiful series of prints. So that's in the first room. In the second room is their artist proofs. They were never intended to be seen. He gifted this to me. He trusted me with it. He's quite jealous with his things. He's very protective of his things. And I'm, again, very honored that he trusted me with it, because there's no other copies of them. They are all just a single edition prints that he made for a book. So he was commissioned to illustrate a book for the national, in Nigeria, the National Catholic School Program for 5th through 6th year students. So it was, all the great stories of the Bible, and they needed to be illustrated. He did 60 illustrations for it, black and white illustrations. And this is the first time anyone's seen them outside of that book.
That's amazing.
That book was in circulation for a long time. And generations of children would have seen Bruce Onobrakpeya's illustrations in that book. It's important to say that because Bruce is not just famous because he's like an important artist. He's also like just a part of, popular culture in this way. He's illustrated so many important books. People grow up seeing his line making and his way of visualizing things because of his ongoing sort of career as someone who is commissioned to illustrate a number of things that would be in your everyday life. So he's bigger than just a regular famous fine artist. He's just a part of
that's amazing.
The last 60 years of so many aspects of Nigerian culture.
That's amazing. That's amazing. He's one of those ubiquitous artists. Like just his style is known for.
Yeah, like you would grow up maybe not even knowing his name, but everyone's household had like some print on the wall, even if it was like a postcard, framed or a poster. That kind of.
How big a deal was it for him to be commissioned by the church to do those murals in the first place?
I think the big deal of it came afterwards. So the Catholic Church, this father that I mentioned previously, they were working, I think they began working in Nigeria in 1947. And this particular branch of the Society of African Missions, their missionary practice was creative. They created all these art programs. And you have to think, if they were operating most prolifically from 1947 until the early 70s, this is a crucial time, the time that I care about, that I spoke about at the beginning.
Yes,
this is late colonial period, early post-colonial period. And so for a lot of artists that ended up becoming these giants in the Nigerian art world, like Bruce Onobrakpeya, they were able to receive some of their first important commissions and to really sort of flex their muscles and spread their wings as living, practicing artists who could feed themselves on this because of the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church has this really interesting and surprising relationship with Nigerian modernism that people wouldn't necessarily know.
Yeah.
And so I hope that's implied in the show and that people pick up on that. But I think that's an exhibition of its own. Because they commissioned a number of artists who became very well known, like Bakaye, who was a sculptor from Nigeria, to do these incredible commissions inside of church interiors, which of course, if you know anything about the Catholic Church, that's been going on since the beginning, right? Like these beautiful, ornately decorated churches. So that part's not surprising. That part's common. What's surprising, or different, I should say, maybe, was that these particular priests encouraged and probably rather enthusiastically these artists to make these works be culturally relevant. They had a lot of creative control. Which is why in these series, both the 14 Station of the Cross, Section 1 of the exhibition, and in May Your Kingdom Come, Section 2, where we see these artist proofs for the book, you see distinctly Nigerian backgrounds, Nigerian clothing. In the colored ones, you can see brown Jesus. And that was not of concern to them. The story, the message, the feeling of Christ, and the goodness in the Bible. The lessons it offers was the point. So they didn't get lost in the weeds trying to convince people that Jesus was blonde hair, blue eyed, and they weren't concerned at all. These priests, that is, with historic or geographic accuracy. Right? This isn't Rome or Israel. We're going to go ahead and put this in Hausa land and this thing in Yoruba land, and we don't mind because the story is the point. That was not always well received by the greater Catholic community, ironically or non-ironically. If you know a little bit more about the context of these kinds of things, a lot of the more conservative Nigerian Christians were the ones that were the most outspoken about this being wrong or blasphemous. But by and large, it was well received, and it really helped to sort of hasten and catapult his career and the career of other artists that had these commissions.
That's fascinating, because he would expect, or I would expect, a lot of pushback of showing a black Jesus. Like, that's, blasphemy 101 America. Like, we never, you know what I'm saying? Like, we have like the black Jesus pictures in grandma's house, but that's in grandma's house.
Right.
That ain't nowhere where people can see it. You know what I mean? And so for the church to commission it personally, I think is fascinating. fascinating.
These priests were considered relatively radical. Yeah.
Yeah, but even like the outfits, where you were telling me that the outfits were of the actual troops that were post-colonial troops in Nigeria, their outfits are shown on some of the soldiers that are inside of the prints.
They were actually colonial era, which is even more interesting because he made these in the immediate post-colonial era, but he was referencing, Nigerian political history. So during colonialism, the police units that were there at the time to sort of be extensions of the crown and its initiatives, he painted them as he painted their uniforms into the pieces as the people that were prosecuting Jesus, not the people that condemned him, but the people that were making sure that the work was carried out.
Right.
So he's saying a lot there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. A whole lot.
Speaking of clothes, another thing I love about the show that really speaks to the time that the first two sections were commissioned, which again is 66 through 69 for our show. Is that in a single work, he'll have references to a diverse range of groups. So on purpose, right? That's intentional. There might be a man wearing a traditional Orobo hat, and there might be Adire prints in the background, which is Yoruba. There might be, so he's mixing all of these different ethnic groups. And I think that's important because in this time, you have to think Nigeria didn't exist. Colonialism created a thing called Nigeria.
Right.
And then when they were independent, they had to kind of imagine what Nigeria would now look like on their own. And they had, I'm sure, this incredible optimism. And I think the ideal was for this, sort of multi-ethnic, utopia. And so you can see that in some of his work in a way that I don't think you see so much later on, like a couple decades later. But in that time, it's like, okay, so now nationhood means ethnic diversity and celebration of all of us, and all of us is what Nigeria is, right? And so you see that in his work with the choices he makes, where he's clearly referencing a broad range of different groups that live in Nigeria. Yeah.
And how amazing was it to you that the High had all of the prints? Because
it was so amazing. I was like, I'm done. This is the show.
Because I find that fascinating, because a lot of times when artists make these prints, and so many of them that belong in a set, it's rare that you actually keep the set together, or that a museum would have the forethought to acquire the entire suite of like something. Mm-hmm. So they had to be pretty significant and pretty important. Whoever made that decision, thank you for doing it. But how rare is that for him to have complete sets of his work? Because, you talk work for 60 years. I'm sure the man has made and forgotten more work than we ever thought of.
I think it's pretty rare. Even when I find a complete set at another museum, they're not all from the same number, right? Mm-hmm. It'll be like they filled in the gaps with like,
Number 8.
Some later, some later editions, you know. We have the whole set from the 4th edition out of 50. They're all 4 out of 50. So that's even more
that's
rare.
Amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah. So that's been cool to see. I would say that's extremely rare.
Yeah. What did Bruce say about him? Because there's a video in the show where you went over and talked to him. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you had like mad long conversation with him. Man, he looked like he can talk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
while I was working on this show, I got to sit with him about 5 times, and most of the time, I have to say, and this is completely fair, it was trust earning. A lot of it was him interviewing me, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad I passed. As I said, he trusted me with works that people didn't even know existed. Some of his children even told me they didn't realize he had so many of those proofs.
Wow.
Because 50 years, plus.
He's been making.
So keeping those things around, he's got them tucked away. He's selective about who he shares them with or who knows what he has. We talked a lot, but he was really clear about how keen he was to do the series. I'm under the impression, based on what he told me, that he did take time to think about whether or not he wanted to do it. I think he took close to a year considering whether or not he was going to take that first commission, which was the mural that ended up becoming the prints for Stations of the Cross. But once he, was resolved about it.
Well, what
He
did
felt
he
very
say,
strong.
What did he say was the determination to actually help him think about doing it?
I don't know. I wonder if he was considering things like, I can only guess. He didn't really articulate to me why he pondered it for so long, but if I had to guess, I would think some concerns about the controversy, because he would want to do it his way. I would imagine maybe feeling like he didn't want to be pigeonholed as a Christian artist.
Yeah.
I would imagine feeling like he's not Catholic and maybe he shouldn't be doing this as a non-Catholic. He's actually Anglican. He taught at a Catholic school, which is how the priest found him. The priest also did a lot. I learned this through going through Kevin Carroll's archives in Cork, Ireland, that he did a lot of inquiries as well. So Bruce was also recommended, but I think the network was obviously like most immediately the Catholic schools, the Catholic churches. So that could have been a part of it, that he's like, I'm not Catholic. And he, in the video, as you may recall, in the exhibition, he says it first of all. He's like, first, I want to say I'm not Catholic. Right? Like he might be a little subconscious about that because, just like any of us would be like, I'm not this ethnic group, but I'm doing a show about this ethnic group, or I'm not this religion, but I'm doing a show about this religion. He wants to disclose that and be transparent about that. And so what's powerful about saying that is that then you can go into part 2, which is, this is my specific telling.
Right.
And you are the authority on your own interpretation.
Yeah.
No one can take that away from you, right? Now, if you've disclosed that, hey, I'm not this thing, but this is how I see it and this is what it means to me, it's a really powerful thing to do. So I think that's probably where he landed, because that's what he says all the time now, that he was like, well, you know what? I can still speak to this story. And anyhow, as he says in the video, Anglican and Catholic aren't that different.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and do this the way I want to, because I think the story of Jesus is the point. And I can get with, what these priests are trying to do by commissioning us. And they're creating an ecosystem for us to actually live. Yeah. They're giving us some funding and finances to continue to do other types of work. And I want to support that. Yeah.
And because I would think that he wouldn't want to be a part of any propaganda that was taking place.
Right.
That's a very easy way for you to use certain artists, create certain imagery. Now it's being used for purposes that you didn't intend. I would take long thoughts about that too.
Yeah, to your point, he's probably a little suspicious, like, what's going on here?
Yeah, who are these people?
Right. And I think he gave himself time to go see other artists that he had commissioned. And he was really impressed with that work. He says that in this book, The Spirit and Ascent, he talks about how the caliber of the work, he was like, okay, I'll be in good company, because he was critical of commissions from Westerners, that is to say Europeans and Americans, they were just satisfied with kind of garbage, low quality African art, just to call it African, right? There was this exoticizing and this
that still happens.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
In the contemporary art space.
we love them funny names on something.
Yeah. Give us some tribal something. Yeah. We're gonna buy it. Because it's black now. And we get to put it on our wall and everybody knows.
Exactly, yeah.
We're the liberals.
See, I love the blacks.
See,
look at me.
Look at me. And so he was like, well, they weren't on that. Like he went and saw other artists who had been commissioned by them in the Akiti program and things like that. And he was like, okay, they're serious about commissioning good work. It's not just about it being African. It's about it, or looking African, whatever that means when you're trying to force it, right?
That's that pigeonhole.
Right. Like this is authentically sort of a Nigerian vernacular expression of the stories of Jesus Christ. Yeah. And I can get with that.
Yeah. Right? I love that. I was fascinated when going through the show and just the Station of the Cross. There's a way in which he's printing, and this is me, the printmaker, being very
Let's
meticulous.
Go technical.
Yes, meticulous and technical, nerding out. So, if y'all don't like prints, you got to fast forward because I'm about to go in. And it's something about the way that he was layering colors, especially when I'm looking at him, he wasn't doing a full registered color. There's colors on top of colors, 2 colors on the same block in some instances that kind of come in and out, disturbs the image. Some of it is clear, some of it is not. And I just found the color play inside of those prints were very, very expertly done. I'll say that.
Yes, in abstract, right? Because often that dance of color had nothing to do with the black and white. Yeah. Right? Like there wasn't coloring inside the lines, we'll say.
Yes.
In every instance.
Yeah.
Which obviously he was intentionally not doing, which I think is really interesting too.
Yeah. Because I thought it was interesting that, speaking of coloring outside the lines, when you have certain registration, you always put the key block on the outside. So the black line is the border frame for the entire print. But in a lot of these prints, the colors were not only going outside of the box, creating a new edge towards the outside, but still registered in the exact same place it was supposed to be.
Right.
And so that extra part, that extra half inch of red on the outside left part of it was meant to be there.
Right.
Which I love.
Right.
Because they, don't confine me, especially as a printmaker when you're doing stuff, but it still was registered perfectly. It's fascinating work that he did. This was in the 60s. I can imagine how great he is at doing stuff at this point.
So beautiful. It's really hard to, everything you just expressed, it's so hard to like show that in photographs too. You have to be in the space with it and get close to it and step away from it and like really experience them in person. I think those things are so much more beautiful in person. And as Jamal said, I'm not just plugging to plug. I really encourage people to go and see it if they're in the Atlanta area or in the Southeast. It's on until July 30th. Those prints are so stunning. And they didn't need almost any conservation help.
Wow.
The collector that we got them from was a diplomat who clearly took care of them. When he passed away, his children donated it to the museum. He had gotten them from Bruce directly back then. So he not only bought the whole set or was gifted the whole set, but he kept them in great condition.
Yeah.
The second room of prints, the black and whites that were references for the children's book, those needed a lot of conservation help, which is how paper twerks.
Yeah, that's how it is. Yeah.
But these didn't. They were just still in amazing condition. They needed very little help.
Yeah.
So if you're an art collector, please
take care of yourself. Yeah.
Take care of yourself. If it's paper, get it out of light here and there. Yeah.
Especially
put it in a dark, dry place for a while. Bring it out, to play here and there.
Were they in a portfolio? Like
they were.
Okay, maybe that was one of the main things that helped it out.
Yeah,
like you keep it in portfolio, wax paper in between, so that everything is like nice and protected,
and they look
away
beautiful.
from the light, like you said. Yeah.
They look like textiles to me too. Maybe that some of that is the movement of color that you mentioned, but also so many of them are on rice paper.
Yeah, it's the rice paper.
It feels like
it's the oil in the rice paper. It makes it like
it looks like linen or something.
Yeah, it's one of the things where to me I love printmaking because it's so tactile. Even though as much as it is a visual texture that you're seeing, the actual touching of the paper, you'll start to feel when wax paper gets filled with oil-based ink. It does start to have this like really velvety kind of soft kind of texture to it. So I can imagine they feel like that. I know nobody would ever let me touch them, but but if I could, I can imagine what they feel like, what they smell like when I look and see them.
Yeah.
Tell me about this in terms of setting up a show like this at the Hive, because even in the room, it's all painted the one color, and you took elements from the drawings and put them up on the wall. Tell me about that process of setting up a show and like how you make those decisions as you go. Like, or is it you making those decisions, or is it the people that are designing the room? Is that a new, different person?
I think the heaviest hand most curators have is in the story that's being told. What arguments are we making blatantly implied? What are the supports, meaning the artworks that are going to help us make those arguments or tell that story? And then the rest, is really, I think if you're doing it the best way, is really collaborative.
Yeah.
So I have always, no matter what institution I work with, strongly relied on my design team. I think they are the special sauce. They help us not only cross the finish line, but like push it further than we thought.
Yeah.
I also believe very deeply in the power of just spatial design, architecture, in conveying emotion, suggesting the path to walk down first. When you think you're making that left or right on your own free will, we're suggesting it, but with the positioning of things or the way the light is.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is really cool to me, and I'm not the expert. And I have so much respect for that I always really lean in and collaborate with designers on everything from font to color to spatial distribution of things. So the suggestion to do some kind of graphic came kind of broadly from the director. It was one of his only notes that he gave me. And it wasn't something that he needed to happen. It was just a suggestion. He was like, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. And then when I met with the design team, I thought the way to do that, if we were going to do it, which obviously we ended up going with, was to pull and trace directly from the works, especially Adire references, because they are the thing that feature the most prominently in that room, especially, but throughout the entire exhibition. He's constantly referencing those geometric shapes of Adire textiles.
Yeah.
And Adire is indigo, it's blue. So that's the reason for that color in that room. We actually never even looked at any other palette. We looked at a million different blues, but we never even looked outside of the blue range because there's so much beautiful, as you said, like these subtle differences in blues, layerings that make the blue look slightly different.
Yeah.
And we thought that would make the works pop more.
Oh, it definitely worked.
The blue I think was never a question.
Yeah.
And the graphic that we chose in the space was the Adire for the same reasons we chose blue, I think.
Yeah.
He's clearly paying homage to craft tradition in the western part of Nigeria.
And I like the simplicity of it because there's so much going on inside of it. And if you understand printmaking work, you can see how layered it is and how technical some of the stuff is, but how expressive it is, like also. So I don't think it needed a lot of noise around it to make it set off. I think you did just need a palette to give it a place to set off from. Some kind of context, very subtle, little idea variations of the symbols elsewhere. And then you turn the corner and you see this big blown up piece of one of the lino cuts, which I thought was also a brilliant idea. Just step around that corner, it's boom, it's life size.
Thank you. I insist. You'll see this. I have another exhibition opening at the High in a few weeks, and you'll see this a pattern. I love giant graphics so much.
I love it too, and printmaking itself lends so much to this because a lot of these prints, especially in the second room, were no more than 10 by 12. Like they're not that huge. So when you do see them blown up completely, you do get
that second room. Those are 11 by 8.
They're smaller than very small, but they're super clean. Like just in terms of printing and carving, it's so magnificent. Even when you blow them up to that scale, they still hold up as well as in the small size as the big size.
Yeah. I love that second room. That's my favorite one. Yeah. I'm probably not supposed to pick a favorite, but and it's because it's so simple. And I think in the simplicity is where you truly see genius. It's like how they make chefs cook an omelet, right? To assess their real skill.
Yep.
If you can do something that simple and still make it signature, special, and brilliant, then that's saying something. Complexity, you can pile on things.
Yeah, you
can intellectualize something to death, okay? But if you can do something that's reductive and it's still powerful and makes people stop and stare at it.
Yeah, there's something special about it. There's something special about it.
You are a true master, right?
Yeah, seeing all those prints at that size, it got me thinking. And I went home. I told Carlton, I was there with Carlton Mackey, who also works at the High, and I told him like I got to do more small prints because these are fascinating. And if you see my work, I love large woodcuts. 36 by 48. I'm into the big stuff. But when I saw those like small things, I realized how much energy and impact you can have just in technique and design alone. That's all. Is that all you're leaning on? Technique and design. That's all you need. And you make anything seem momentous.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sophisticated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love those. It was a section of them that had, which I found really highlighted some of the keys to his technique and how he goes in and out of positive and negative space and how he goes in and out of the black and white and has that rhythm to the prints that is very evident in the little section that you set up right there. I love the show.
Thank you.
It's definitely one of my favorites. I tell everybody like, yo, you seen that brew show? That's what you need to do. You need to go see that brew show.
I don't know what you're doing today.
What you doing? Yo, I'll go back with you. I'll go back with you.
It's a really special moment. It is. Of a very important artist.
Yeah.
In all of Africa, let alone Nigeria.
It's amazing. Tell me a little bit about the last room, which has some of the blocks and like he does this kind of plastic technique. If you could describe it to me a little bit,
because it's kind of he kind of doesn't like to talk about it. It's a little bit of a secret, but he talks about it being a part. This is the thing I will say about it. I love how much he embraces mistake.
Mm-hmm.
He's not embarrassed. You know, he forgot some of the stuff he learned from Rue, and he just started playing around, and he didn't have all the chemicals he needed, and he started like just messing up, quote unquote. But in those eras, I should say unintentional, and the unintentional things that happened, he created an entire new language for printmaking for himself. So a lot of that plastograph is based around sort of something that started off as unintentional that became signature. And then not only did he lean into it, and not only does he share that it started off as a mistake, I think when that kind of thing happens, it kind of frees us.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, I'm just going to do whatever now. I'm just going to boop, boop, boop. Just going to mix
you
this
realize
and
you
mix
can
that.
do anything.
I'm just going to, because last time I messed up, it went great. So I'm just going to keep doing this, whatever. You throw the like rule book behind you and you just go.
Oh, yeah.
So he's become this incredible innovator.
I love it.
He turned a quote unquote mistake into an entire new
I love that moment.
lexicon.
And
when
I teach, I try to give people that moment a lot. And it's a certain way you have to do it, is that I have to see what they're doing, know they're going to make a mistake, and encourage them to keep going. Because I know it's going to mess up. But it's that moment of discovery where you're like, I can literally do whatever I want, and it doesn't matter. Like the confines of the technique don't matter. Not really. Not when you're really making art, when you really get into it, and you really creating. There's so much space for you to do literally anything you want. And you really have to get to a point where you're embracing that fact. And then you're really free as an artist. And I feel like that's where he is in a lot of ways.
He's like, oh, I can mess up and it still goes
like, what? This is
horribly
awesome.
right.
Don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. It's funny.
And being conservative, half the time on the other side of that era is something greater.
Yeah.
It's something that you would have never done.
Yeah.
Right. So thank goodness. I like to think of it. Olu Umoda talks about this a lot, and I know we'll talk about him in a moment. You know, I love this idea of collaborating with whatever the materials, the moment, the thing, which starts to get into spirituality again, right? You know,
it's partly there because you spend so much time with this thing, and I think that's what people need to appreciate.
The muses are whispering in your ear anyway,
all the time,
right? Like it's not like, we take our ego out of it, which literally a mistake makes you do, right? You're like, oh, that didn't work out the way I wanted.
Yeah.
And then once you start removing the ego, you get closer to that greater thing that we can't articulate.
Even when you spend, even with those small prints, his hands have touched every centimeter of it, right? Every part of it, the upside, the downside. I've inked it, I've carved it, I've interacted, I've molded this thing. Me and this thing have a bond now, whether we want to admit it or not. And then the printing is kind of, to me, as an after effect of it. Like it's a bonus to whatever journey and discovery I've had along the way. And none of the material is lost, because even in the show, you have some of his metal etching plates. You have the big wooden sculpture assemblage, like of a print of block. I don't even know what it is. Like it's become its own thing at this point, which I love. Yeah. That's what I love, is there's no wasted material.
It's like the final frontier. I think about that all the time. Like he went everywhere with printmaking, and then he was like, what's left? I'll do something with the plates. Now the plates are sculptures.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And it's also extremely transparent, which again, he does, right? Like he's honest about plastograph being a mistake, and then I made it a thing. I love that. Yeah. He's totally dancing with the muses, and he just leans in.
And the material becomes important.
It's worth saying, he's such a kind person too. He's such a kind man.
I can believe that. You don't make art for 60 years and not be
you did
nice.
Something right.
Yeah, you did something right.
I wanted to make a point about you talking about scaling back down. There's something about small works too that it makes you get closer. It makes it encourages stillness, I'll say. Yeah. Like you have to get close to it. You have to have an intimate experience with it. And so when you were talking about the hands that touched every corner, I'm like, when you get close to something, you kind of can get a sense of that. Yeah. You can't necessarily aesthetically see it. It's not like it's covered in fingerprints, but you get a sense for it because you've gotten so close to the work and you've had to think about it. And there's a reflection that's happening there, perhaps, arguably longer than when you have to stand at a distance to take in the whole scale of a larger work.
Absolutely.
And that's always really nice.
Absolutely.
I love that the exhibition gives us both. There's that big moment at the end where everything's scalable, like, everything's upscale rather. You have this quiet moments for the first 2/3 where you really are invited to explore the work and try to understand it and think about it and access that which is here and here.
Yeah.
In addition to here.
Yeah. And that last room really is an exploration because he's dipping into a lot of different designs. Like you see images pop up in different iterations. And so, which I love that kind of exploration where I use this mother and child in this one, bring that same mother and child back, but I'm going to add a little bit more to this. And now it's in a circle, and now it's in metal. Now it's like all these different things can happen, but the image is basically the same. You see it in 3 or 4 times.
There's 3 mother and childs. There's 3 Last Suppers.
Yeah,
and he's scaling them up. He's scaling them down. Sometimes he's just redrawing.
He's making it
in
a
new
part
ways.
Of
the
else.
title's exactly the same.
Yep.
That is not a coincidence. Really cool.
Yeah,
he just for him, he's a very, and I'm sure this is why the show, one of the reasons the show resonates with you, he's a very process-focused artist. He doesn't care about creating, quote unquote, a new image. He will literally draw the same image over and over again. He will reuse plates. He will reuse matrices, whatever. But then he'll completely apply a different process to it. And that's what makes the works unique. There are some that misunderstand Bruce's work. They'll say, there's so many of these, so the value is less. But none of them are the same.
None of them are the same. Yeah.
None of them.
None of them are the same. That's the same people walk up to me when I'm out doing shows and it's like, they see my print and ask me where the original is. And it's kind of, this is the original. Like, you don't understand what you're looking at. Like, let me explain it to you. Like, it's that type of thing.
This is what printmaking is.
It's that type of thing. And so even this Bruce show to me is a real embrace of the print process because what I like to tell my students to free them up is if you have 3 different ideas, 3, 5, 10 ideas, you can do all of them. You don't have to be confined with this single image of the thing. And now I'm done with this woodblock forever. Like, no, reprint it, print it in blue, print it in red.
Then make a sculpture out of it.
Make a sculpture.
Apparently,
like you do.
Like eventually make a sculpture out of the block.
Exactly. Like that's the point of it. Like you have to embrace the process. You have to be free and just go with it. Like what is your mind telling
and don't be
you?
precious about it, right?
Exactly.
When I think about the blocks that he's turned into sculptures and given away, like if he misses it, he just makes another one.
Make another one.
He just makes another block of the same thing.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So you mentioned that I'm asking you questions now.
Oh, go for it.
So you mentioned that you really liked the smaller scale and it made you think about incorporating that a little bit more again. What else did you walk away with in terms of, as I'm asking you this very specifically because you're a printmaker, how else were you inspired in terms of the ways you're thinking about your own practice after you've seen that show?
I think the way in which he was tackling color in the layering process, especially in the stages of the cross, like when I look at it, I'm not just looking at it as a viewer. I'm looking at it as a printmaker. I'm looking at it to reverse engineer. Like, how did he do this? Because I want to see it and enjoy it, but I also want to understand it fundamentally. Like, what did he do? How did he do it? Like, when did he add that yellow and that green and that blue, like right over top? Like, this is not an accident. Like, he had to plan it. That's what printmaking is. So it's because I understand that part of the process. I'm looking to use it in my own thing because some of that texture, my goodness, some of the texture that he created with some of that layering in those cross pieces, I gotta go see the show because the pictures that I post on Studio Noize is not gonna do it justice. No. You really have to see it. But the texture that he can get, and then if you overlay the key block, which is black on top of it, you still see the image clearly. You see Jesus, you see the cross, you see what I really love, a lot of different designs in the crosses as he go from one to one. I love it. But but to have that kind of texture inside of them, I can imagine that if there was a run of 50, all of them probably have a different texture.
Oh yeah.
Because there's no way to duplicate it. There's no way for you to get that exact stroke of green inside of this blue, beside this red, each time you do it. So that kind of the way that he's printing is such a freedom that I think we westernize ideas of super tight registration all the time. So I want to add that element of freedom to my work when I see it.
Yeah.
So when I walk away, I see that, and I also see the small works for me were very impressive because they're so clean. They're so clean. There's no, and I'm not the person to know this. He will probably be able to tell you for sure, but there's no wrong marks. There's no extra marks made. This is exactly the way it should go. Like this tree, this one smooth cut, I can see him. You can count them. I love it in a print where everything is so clear, but you can count the marks inside of it to get the texture. Like, how did he do it? It seems so simple, but I'm sure that he could probably do it. I mean, he's 90 years old. He could probably do it in like 10 minutes. but you know, it takes a lifetime of experience to be able to confidently make those marks as quickly at that size and move on and let it be whatever it is. And there's a lot of that letting it be inside of it. That, you know, I appreciate it.
No, thank you for that. I think it's what you're saying is kind of like it's a balance between like technique, intentionality, and play. Yeah.
It's the freedom.
We got to remember to play.
Yeah, we got to set it a bunch of
creative.
Times. At a certain point, you kind of unlock this level of mastery that frees you from all conventions. I could do whatever I want, and I feel like that's what he did in a lot of these pieces because they feel effortless. They don't feel like they were labored over. They don't feel like he adjusted and readjusted and did this and did that, but everything fits. Like it's supposed to. They're wonderful prints. They're absolutely magnificent prints. I love it.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm so happy you like the show. You're so geeked about the show.
I am.
This is my favorite thing. Almost every printmaker that's come to see the show is like a different level of appreciation for it, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, because we know how hard it is. Are you doing this in the 60s? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, man.
I've had a couple of friends that are printmakers come there and look at me like, what? Already, like first thing they see, you know, that David the Shepherd.
Yeah. Love that one.
I think it was Atu Ribeiro, like sent me a text of a photograph of that print, which is hilarious because it's literally it's isolated.
It's right in the front.
It's the first thing, and he sent it to me. He's like, already. Sorry for calling you out, Atu.
Yeah,
but he, a great you know, he's known as a sculptor, but he studied printmaking. Yeah. So I think you all have you get to enjoy it on levels that maybe everyone else can.
Yeah, because if you understand it, then you know how hard it is. Hard it is. It's not an easy thing that you're looking at. Like, and we can take that for granted in a lot of stuff that you see in museums because you see the finished product, you see it in a big white walls, white spaces, everything is clean. Like, you know, security guards are telling you not to touch it, like all this stuff, but you don't realize this was labored over. Yeah. This took time. This took energy. This took years of experience. Like it doesn't just happen that you end up with this Rauschenberg inside of the high. Like it's not a mistake.
It wasn't his first time out.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what do you enjoy the most about making those kind of discoveries? Because you do get to play in this collection that, and quite frankly, when we talk about the high, and this is no diss to the high, but they're not experts in showing in African art, especially contemporary African art.
Yeah, I think we're really known for our photography and folk art collections. I think they're world class. My colleagues who manage those departments have a reputation that they just get to kind of play in and build upon. I, on the other hand, am trying to build a whole new thing from scratch. So yeah, I think I have my work cut out for me a little bit. Just a little ambitious.
Yeah. You think so?
So the horse I rode in on was to create a leading collection of 20th century African art, which is not what we're known for.
No, not at all.
We do have these really important, a really important starter kit, I'll say. So we have incredible photography from Malik Sidibe and Sanlé Sore, who are doing portrait photography in the early post-colonial period. That is incredibly important. We have the Bruce Onobrakpeya. We have Twin 77, who was an important Oshogbo artist. We have Iba Njaye, who was a Senegalese, especially draftsman, but artist of all types. and an early post-colonial Senegal. And so we have a number of late apartheid era, early post-apartheid era artists as well in our collection.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like that gave me sort of a justification for, hey, we've got a little bit of a head start. Let's be more intentional about building this out and making this more robust.
Right.
But it is quite the challenge. I didn't inherit an incredible collection of African modernism.
No.
I'm trying to build one from scratch, essentially. Not from scratch, but from a modest offering, but an important offering. We've got some really important artists. So again, I think it gives me the justification to continue to focus on it. And the museum has been really supportive of that.
That's good, because especially a lot of institutions, they can get caught up in ending the African story at some level where the British stole everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so nothing to some people in the high collection has been like this for a while, because they used to have all the African stuff in the basement.
Mm.
And I used to go there all the time and see the little videos of like the performances and the costumes and stuff like that, the little sculptures. Nothing after that. Right.
Africa only exists in the past.
Exactly.
Did you know?
So that kind of distorting the story of what Africans were doing the entire time, which especially as you talk about transitions and the way in which artists interpret history, that artists are constantly interpreting history just by the nature of working through whatever moment of their lives that they live through. You get a record of everything that's been happening, because it's impossible to make work separate from life.
Mm-hmm.
I find the best artists never can make art outside of the zeitgeist of what's going on during that time. They absorb it. You can't help it.
Mm-hmm.
And it finds itself in ways in the work. You see it when you can look at certain artists, line them up, and you have a timeline of Nigeria as it's developing based on Bruce and other artists that were there. And it's there. It's always there. And the story is not being told, which I find aggravating in a lot of ways. It annoys me.
I have so much to say about what you just said. Is it my turn yet?
Go for it. We want to hear you. It's your goal.
Oh my goodness. So firstly, I do want to say I don't have a problem with so-called African traditional art, material culture, objects that have functional and spiritual purpose. And I do believe that there's a lot to talk about in terms of the incredible skill and craftsmanship in even just the mundane, ordinary, functional objects. Sometimes things are not do not have a spiritual function, and they're still so beautifully done. And I think there's space for that. But I think the preoccupation, especially with things like masquerade, that people had in the colonial era and sort of this residual post-colonial era, has had a lot to do with a campaign, whether they intended to or not, a campaign to exoticize and other Africa, not understand it, certainly not put it on par with art movements happening in Europe. And so there has been this overrepresented interest in that particular way of making. Meanwhile, most of those objects, first of all, the mythology of them being old is false. Most of the objects in my collection that are cultural objects are 20th century objects anyway. So it's important, and that's also important, not in a disparaging way, but in a way that sort of, I hope, exemplifies and celebrates the fact that these are not crafts from the past, that they're ongoing living traditions. People are still making Benin bronzes, for example. We're not precious about returning them because they're lost, rare things. They're being made every day by the generations of craftsmen who've always made them, right? The lineages that and the apprentices that have always done it are still doing it. That's not why you have to return them. You have to return them for ethical reasons, not because, oh my God, what are we going to do? They're just so rare. So the things are not a part of some mythologized past Africa, some purist post-colonial tradition. That's one. And two, if you're going to have 20th century art, at any rate, you might as well tell a more robust story about African making and art, right? And alongside Masquerade are the Bruce Onobrakpeyas and all these other incredible artists, right? Some of them that I mentioned we have in our collection. They work together. They're happening simultaneously, which is another thing that I think Bruce is implying in his work. It especially is, I think, visible in the sort of implied thesis of the Victor Hegemonor piece at the end of the show. There's one work in the show that is not Bruce, and it's a contemporary artist who uses rosary beads, thousands of them, to create the figurative image of the Oba, who has spiritual and political power in Benin. And so I think having this notion of multiple belonging, or in some instances more like syncretism, creolization, but in the case of Bruce, I think, and in the case of Victor, it is more about a full actualization of both simultaneously, rather than a creolization, which implies pieces of each. That is also true in the aesthetic, right? That people are making masks and making paintings and sculpture and whatever you think is sophisticated. They're doing everything they're doing in Europe, right?
Yeah.
Paris and Berlin and salons and all these things that we learn about in our history were happening all over the continent as well. And we haven't learned about that because we've privileged exoticizing.
Right.
This is why they're different.
Yeah.
Subtext. This is why we can justify colonizing them. They are so very different from us.
Look at these savages.
We're not going to look at these watercolors because then you might think
exactly
they're on par with us.
Exactly.
Right? So even though those things were being made at the same exact time.
Yeah.
So yeah, my mission is more immediately, of course, to tell a more robust, accurate, contextual, true story of making in the 20th century in Africa, but by extension, telling a more robust, true, and accurate story about what Africa is in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what people need to see a lot of times, and kind of get out of the pigeonholing that happens so much.
And deal with the fact that they have some disinterest, right? Because I'm very frequently, even just today, asked, well, how do I learn more about this thing or that thing? Google it. Someone asked me, it's shameful, but like a couple months ago, like, so when you're in Africa, because I'm there all the time, yeah? So like, are you like, where do you stay? Are you like staying in huts? I'm like, it's the year 2023.
Are you serious?
Also, Google.
They drive cars and everything over here.
Literally, all you have to do is Google it. You just don't care, right?
Yeah.
It's there for you.
Yeah.
We have mega computers in our back pockets all day long. All you have to do is Lagos, Dar es Salaam, images.
Yeah.
Like it's not that far away from you. We really have like held on, by we I mean the West, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Have held on to a very particular narrative about what Africa is, and that's enough for us.
Yeah.
We don't want it.
That's all we want.
We don't want more.
We want they live in huts, they got flies on their eyes.
I love my people. I'm multiple generations, South Carolina and Georgia. I'm a Black American. I'm going to say we do the same thing, right? We have different motivations for doing it, but we also have this reductive singular view of Africa.
It's American exceptionalism, right? Where we think that we are the dominant, most powerful, smartest people to ever exist. How could they possibly build buildings, drive cars, have the internet? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's racism above and beyond anything is what we gotta call it.
And then we've been acculturated into that racism.
Of cultured racism.
Unfortunately.
That's exactly what it is. Because even Black people think the same thing.
Yeah.
Like,
I ain't going to Africa.
Yeah, we're going to see some lions? Like, no, we ain't going to see no lions. We're going to the club just like everywhere else we go.
Going to the strip club, and I got a dollar machine.
Having a good old time. Yeah.
And you will not know that you are not.
No, you won't know.
In the best strip club
and this is why I watch, this is a random fact, but I watch a lot of Nollywood movies, right? And I love it because it shows like, what if the world was completely Black?
Right.
Like, what if the lawyers, the police officers, the merchants, everybody is Black? This is like a new world order. Guess what? That's what they do in Lagos.
That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
Right.
Everybody's Black, and they do the exact same thing that we do, except it's just Black people doing it. Like people can't understand.
Yeah.
Like, how could you do it without?
Where am
people?
I staying? In a 5-star hotel?
Well, you think you
Sir?
stay, yeah. They got.
Are the roads paved? What?
Craziness, yo.
Google, man.
There's a whole safari. Everywhere you go is just in a safari, ducking lines. It's nonsense, yo. It's nice.
Because there was a time where I'd be like, well, their culture this way. The news only shows death and destruction and war. But there's no excuse anymore.
No.
Come on.
We're choosing it as
social media accounts show all the luxe amazingness of the continent.
You see it.
You just ain't looking. Like, you just choose not to look or follow or whatever. It's there. Everything you want is there.
Exactly. Man, you're great to talk to.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have we been talking a long time? Probably. But you can edit it however you want later.
It's fine. I'm going to let the whole thing ride. It's just, this is
going to be 3 hours of me increasingly getting drunk on Chardonnay.
I told you, studio drink champs today on the Noize.
I can say some. What did Kanye?
No, don't go Kanye.
Kanye lost a lot of money in one sentence.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So I don't want to let you leave without talking a little bit. How I met Lauren was we were both jurors for the Hudgens Prize down here in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Hudgens Center, giving away $50,000, which is a huge amount of money for anybody, life-changing amount of money. But we were part of the jury for that process. I'm very honored to be able to pick the artists that were selected as finalists, which I thought were all amazing, could have all deserved so much money. It was so hard. But
it was so hard. All 4 of them were amazing and so different. So we couldn't even side by side. It wasn't. It was apples and oranges. Yeah, it was tough.
It was impossible. And so, talk about that process of being on the jury. So I haven't discussed this with anybody because I wanted to wait till you came up here to talk about it.
It's tough. I would love to hear. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. But for me, I think ultimately what it came down to was this being such a substantial amount of money. Like, who? You can't talk about in terms of deserve because all of them deserve it.
Yeah.
You have to think about for whom would this go the furthest, right? I felt like some of the other 3 are already like they've picked up some steam. They're going to have their careers are already in mid transformation. And I felt like the one that we picked was still kind of in the dark, at least here, even though he's lived here for 18 years, something like that.
Long time.
Yeah. In his graduate degrees, MFA, he got in Georgia Southern, I believe. I mean, there was this need, I think, to make sure that he knew he was seen and appreciated and a part of this community because this prize is a Georgia prize. It's only awarded to a Georgia artist. And that was, for me, what edged him out in what was a very difficult, probably the most difficult jury I've ever been on.
It was tough. It was tough.
But I was like, this is the reason for me that he very nearly like is the number one choice.
Yeah.
It's this money will go the furthest with this person. This is us saying you are welcome. This is us saying there's a broader acknowledgement of what the demography of this city and its metropolitan areas is now. And so, yeah, I think that was the reason why at the end of the day, because it couldn't be about talent. It couldn't have been about art in there and how good it was, quote unquote. It couldn't have been about who deserved it. I mean, they all were so talented. It was just about how far would this go with each. And I felt like it would go the furthest with him. Yeah.
And I think when we sat down in the process, I think it was very easy to get down to top 10. And even though I don't even remember how many hundreds of things we looked through. But I think the top people stood out mostly. So when we first get there, the first couple of months, it's like, yo, this is easy. They giving away money to me. But
we got down those last 4. I was sweating.
Yeah, we got down to the last 4. The last 4 was Jessica Self, Jamel Wright Sr., Shaniqua Gay, and Olu Omoto were the 4 that we got down to. Well, which was a very tough process to get it because the work, when you've seen the show, and a lot of people commented that this was the best version of the Hudgens Prize show that they've ever seen. I think we picked some super strong artists.
I want to also say to that point, that jar. So normally for people who don't know how the Hudgens works, particularly people who may be outside of Georgia, they keep a jar in the gallery because they do an exhibition with all 4 finalists. And then they have a jar. They have 4 jars in the gallery where people can put pebbles in each jar for the person they think should win. And this is just the public. They don't actually pick, the jurors pick, but it's still like an interesting little experiment. And the jars were even. Like even the public was like,
Yeah, it was something else because there was so much wide range of work that was there. You have Olu with the sculptures. That Jess had sculptures too. Shaniko did a whole installation piece with mural that she painted on the wall, everything. Jamel had these huge fabric experiments that he had up there. So all of the work was so diverse, so different, but also so top notch for whatever they were doing. It was so hard. That was like the hardest meeting we ever had when we picked a winner. And it was so, and I think Olu was I just loved his work. I loved the craftsmanship.
So Olu was awarded it.
Yeah, Olu was the winner. Congratulations to Olu. Still got to get him on the podcast. I want to talk to him. Yeah,
get him in here.
Get his experience.
It's going to be a 4-hour long talk. I love Olu. Olu has like all these beautiful allegories for everything.
Oh yeah. He could talk. He's great. He's great. But just seeing the quality of his work, the craftsmanship of it was just stunning work, just stunning, and stuff that I haven't seen before coming out of him. So definitely awarded him, and I think this was one of the things that gave me an insight to how these awards are given, because having to do it. And two things I want to point out to people. One, make sure your work is documented properly. Because in that first round, believe me, we get so many hundreds of people submitting. Any excuse that anybody can give to eliminate somebody, we're looking for it immediately. So if you're not documenting, if you're not filling out the forms properly, if you don't have a good story, you're not representing yourself properly, you're automatically X'd out. It just makes it easier for us to move on and keep going. And the second thing is always have a consistent body of work that you're going to, because it's not going to be any one piece that's going to save the day for you. It has to be multiple pieces that people are looking at.
That's so true.
Judge.
That's so true.
What do you think?
I think so. I've been on a lot of juries by now. I'm going to take a break from juries. It also feels like playing God a bit. I always feel like, I'm like so sensitive. I'm a sensitive person. And so I always am like, I'm deciding someone's fate and someone's bank account. Like, But yeah, I mean, it's I think it's definitely true. The thing that resonates most with me that you said, all of it's true, but the thing that resonates most is what you said, like a long-term practice, like of doing a particular thing. That doesn't mean that you're making the same thing.
Right.
It just means that you have a very clear thesis.
Right.
Like, this is who I am as an artist. So whether you venture into printmaking or photography or sculpture, whatever, we can see. I want to use a capitalist word and say branded.
Yeah.
We can see your identity as an artist in it, right? It's like, you know who you are. You have made an intentional decision about how you want to fit into this space. That's a thing that a lot of us are looking for. Because if you look like you don't really know what you want to do or what you're trying to say, there's some people that really can clearly articulate what they're doing that are going to edge you out.
Yeah, easily. Because if you have like one stray piece that you're including, it breaks up the series.
Yeah.
Like, it makes it look like, what is this person doing?
Right.
And, you want to have it clear. So you have to make tough choices at the end of the day into how you want to present yourself. Now, the thing that you have on your side is that every juror is different. And so you don't have to go through with a formula to please this particular type of person every single time. You do what you do. You do it consistently, you do it with mastery, and then you present it to the best of your ability all the time.
Yep.
And your story can change. It doesn't have to be the exact same submissions for every single thing that you do. If you have a different way of packaging that you want to do, a different grouping of stuff that you want to submit, because, I think, how many did they submit? 6? I forgot how many images it is, but it's usually around 6 to 10 images that you're submitting to a prize like this. That jurors are looking through, and those 10 images can change. So even you don't have to feel confined. We're going back to what we were saying about Bruce. Have creative freedom. Just embrace the process. Do what you do, and then you present it. And then some of it is just beyond your control. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
Some of it is,
Don't take it personally if you don't get selected into the finalists, or if you don't win. It really, it's different every time. I will say this. If you have made it into a finalist and you know that, they're transparent about that, like, oh, we've got down to 15, but only 5 people are going to get it, or whatever it is, please pat yourself on the back, because that is huge.
Yeah.
That is huge. And to Jamal's point earlier, we usually get there as jurors pretty quickly. So you made it through like the most difficult part. If you're 15 out of 230 like that's a thing.
It's a lot. Yeah.
So if you don't win or you're not a runner up, don't be like, oh, like that's something to celebrate. And just don't personalize it either because you don't know who's in the room, what they're looking for, what's important to them. It is relatively arbitrary after those finalists, like who gets the number one prize. Yeah. Because personalities are personalities. We're people. We're not machines. Mm-hmm. And different people in the room will advocate for different things being important. What do I mean by that? I mean, you may have a really strong thesis, but the execution isn't as strong. Or you may have a very incredible thing that you do, but you only do one thing. Like you are the best printmaker, but you don't do sculpture. And maybe someone in the room wants to see more dynamism. They want to see someone that can do more things. Yeah, that doesn't mean that what you're doing is bad, right? Mm-hmm. It's just who's in the room that day. Truly. But when it's a cash prize, for me, again, I'll repeat, like I tend to, and I won't be on any juries anytime soon, but I tend to think about for whom would this money have the most impact? Mm-hmm. Where are they in their career? Are they already, in other words, this is especially important for me to say, and I'm saying it twice for a reason. You might be an incredible artist who's already had 1 million solo shows. I'm probably not going to vote for you because you're already good. I'm going to vote for the person who's like, this solo show will change their career. So that doesn't technically mean you're not as good as that person. I'm just thinking about the impact of that prize and how big that impact will be before and after. Where would that person's career be? And the bigger the jump, the more I'm going to advocate for that person. So you really shouldn't personalize it and think it's a matter of like who's best. It is not about that at all.
It's not about about
in the best. Slightest.
Yeah, y'all all are great. Everybody out there, you listen to the podcast, you're awesome. Congratulations.
Yes, and I've sat on juries where people care about things like dollar amount, and I like have to argue with them because I don't care. Meaning, what's the price point for their work on the market? And I'm like, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this narrative. I'm looking at this thesis.
And that's the thing that people don't know is the kind of conversations that are happening between even the people that are on the jury or on the panel on
we are fighting board. In there sometimes. Jamal and I never fought. But I was on a panel recently, I won't say which one, where I was literally like, wow, out of my boxing gloves. Out of my boxing gloves. It's a very big, prestigious prize. Yeah. And yeah, I was just like, listen, I don't care whose piece is 150 and whose piece is 50 and whose piece is 6. Okay. I don't work in the commercial gallery market for a reason. I work in a museum.
There we go. This prize is not about that.
I do not care about that. But there were people that, had jury seats that really cared about that. They used the market as an indication for the significance of that artist. I have no regard. So we spar and we try to get somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. And we take it seriously. So that's what y'all take consolation in that none of this is easy and we put our all into it.
We really do.
And, we understand, jurors understand what they're doing. And hopefully we make the best decision we can. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we ain't making no bones about it. It's Lauren right here on the podcast. Thank you for coming, Lauren. Lauren is a new friend of the show. We're going to bring her back multiple times. She's so smart and talk so well and look so good on camera that we got to keep bringing her back to get our audience up.
I would like to thank my mom for making me read 4 hours a night and this melanin. Thank you. That's what I'm going to say when I win whatever award. One day someone's going to give me an award, right?
Yeah, you deserve it. I do. I'm going to make an award for you. That's what's
Then I'm going to take my shirt off, twist it around my hand and break it. Thank you, Jamal, for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Tell them where they can find you, get in touch with you, tell you thank you, all that good stuff.
At Tate Baeza on Instagram, which is ELLETATEBAEZA. And I'm only on Instagram.
That's it.
That's it. I'm not on the Facebook. I'm not on LinkedIn.
That's the only way you get it. You might catch her at the High one day.
I'm at the High Museum of Art. Turns out I'm a full-time employee there somehow.
Go figure.
Even though I'm always in Africa. According to Jamal.
She's always on the road. So try to catch her when you can. It's Lauren on the podcast. Thank you, yo.
Thank you.